Hello, everyone. Thanks for listening to Vita May podcast. I'm happy to recommend using Anchor.fm as my podcast tool. It's a free tool. It automatically publishes your podcast to Spotify. You may manually submit your podcast to Apple Podcasts, Google Play Music, Castbox.fm, and others. It is straightforward to use from your mobile phone application or computer and laptop browser. You can invite friends and record when ready and more. You may also monetize by recording guided ads that you select per episode. Join in on the fun of sharing your experiences and stories and download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Again, that's anchor.fm. Thank you. Welcome to VitaMe. Our topic today is to discuss preparing for interviews. This is one of our favorite topics, common questions asked for sure, so I want to make sure we discuss this. I'm very thankful and excited to have Dina Green join me as a podcast guest speaker. Welcome, Dina.
Thank you.
We met through our Lean In Wonder Women network and have been friends for over 2-3 years now. It's been a while. I felt like it was kind of fast. Throughout the years, we have discussed many work life challenges that we face in our lives. The latter is also one of the big reasons why I have a Vita May podcast. So that's a lot of conversations we've had in the past. So let's get started. Can you please give us some of your background, Dina?
So I grew up in Kenya, and I've been exposed to a lot of different international cultures and people, and I've just grown up having an appreciation for people and languages and the rich cultures that come from that, which is a reason why I decided to join the Lean In meeting, which was how May and I met. And it's been a very exciting journey to share our challenges and experiences throughout life. And we wanted to share it with you now, our wonderful listeners.
Right. So typically I interview my guests. For this session, I will have Dina ask me questions on how to prepare for interviews, and I will try to answer them based on my experience. So I'll start with the first question. What are some challenges that you face in the past when preparing for your interviews?
So I've experienced overthinking. It has been the biggest thing, and May, you know this. Also, the challenge has been the behavioral questions that come up because we have to be more creative with what we share, or knowing what they're looking for depending on the job type. So also the other challenge I would say has also been the different industries and the expectations when it comes to the interviews.
Very true. I know that's very challenging, especially for the ones that are just coming out of school and high school or even college or changing careers. So this is definitely a common struggle besides public speaking itself. So this is one of the more challenging processes for all of us. So you have some questions that we have aligned. So do you want to ask your questions?
Yes, the first one is, how do you set the tone of the interview? Because that's the first thing when you walk in a room of people that you've never met. You have the adrenaline rush, the excitement, and also the fear, and you don't want to mess up. You want to make sure that the rest of your interview goes well. So how do you go about setting the tone?
And we've talked about this several times and among other people. A lot of it is how you walk in, right? We want to psych yourself up and be ready for it. And I mentioned in the past, at least in with my friends and coworkers, listen to upbeat music, something that you like, something that's going to calm you down. Get your mindset to be prepared to be as enlightening as you want. You want to shine as positively as you want. How do you stand out in a pool of candidates? Right? You don't want to be just somebody else, just like someone else that's just coming in the interview. Show your personality. Be yourself. That's the best thing, is being open, being candid. Also show your confidence by being honest as best as you can. If you don't know something, say so. There's good ways to say that when you don't know it. And also show that you're willing to learn. You know, these are people also, regardless of the title that they have. They're just trying to figure out who you are, what type of personality that you have, and are you somebody that they can include in their team? How sociable are you? How well do you adapt to the environment? Can you handle the stress? So a lot of it is going in there as a conversation, having fun, and just think of it like you're going to meet somebody for coffee, even. Tell your story. What are some cool things that you've done in the past that can relate to the role that you want? So remember all the good things that you know. you already have.
So to kind of transition with what you're saying, what about for someone who's completely new into what they're going for in an interview? I mean, I appreciate what you're saying, but sometimes a person's inner voice can dictate what comes out. So how do you improve your self-confidence so that everything you just mentioned is what comes out in the interview?
A lot of practice. It's definitely not perfect. I'll give you an example. I did interview for about a year for whatever job I had. I was in a very toxic environment, had a very bad boss myself, and I basically had it, right? I thought there was a better place that I could be in that was willing to have me as part of their team. So in desperation, I seeked opportunities outside, and I thought, why not keep trying out and find a new position that will be welcoming and would like to have me as part of their team that will I'll becoming an asset, right? But it takes practice. You will definitely have a lot of challenging interviews because you're not confident. But again, just like us learning how to bike,
Right.
how to learn a new skill, it takes practice. There's no shortcut to it.
And that you're right. With the practice, it's definitely going on not perfecting that one interview. You may need to go on a couple of interviews, different companies, and not being stuck that that's the only place that you're going to interview and land the job that you initially wanted. I appreciate you sharing that. That's definitely half of the challenge and the battle is just knowing that it's okay to just keep practicing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not like having a credit score. There's no penalty in applying anywhere, right? I mean, yes, they might have,
and you can keep applying,
yes,
and you're not going to get hit for applying.
No, there is no negative connotation of you applying over and over again. If anything, it gives you props because they say, you know what? They did not stop, and they're very eager, they're very patient, and they're willing to try it again. If anything, that's more respectful that you're willing to take a lot of effort and just show commitment. Just the fact that you're trying over and over, that means you have commitment, that you have not given up, and you're not taking it too personally. If anything, you look at it as a way of improving yourself. And that's the best skill set. That's the best characteristic that anyone would want to have in a team. Is somebody willing to do that over and over.
So let's speak about the self-development improvement. On the side of improving yourself, not just with interviews, but just in life in general, what are some books and ways and resources that can help better improve you in being more confident and have self-esteem? Do you have anything that you can share that has helped you over time?
Definitely books. A lot of good self-help books that are authored by very well-researched companies out there. My favorite one is Mindset by Carol Dweck. I think if you don't have the right mindset, it's very difficult for you to learn and progress forward, right? You have to be able to understand that you can continue to learn by knowing that if you're in a growth mindset, that means you have potential to grow. Somebody that has a fixed mindset, they've accepted it as fact that a trait is just a trait that you were born with and that you have no room to grow. That creates fear. For some people, creates anxiety, right? And desperation. So I read about that book. It's actually very insightful. It talks about how you even grew up as a child, what type of prompts parents give. So for example, getting an A in school. She talks about that research saying it's a lot better for a parent to describe how well they're putting the effort rather than saying that, oh, you got an A, you got a gold medal. If you prompt and say you encourage your child to say you enjoyed the learning versus getting an A itself, they have a stronger propensity to enjoy the journey, to enjoy the learning process, that they know that it's not just about the A. It's about the journey of experiencing life, right? And that's I would say it's well worth it to spend the time. It's at least 200, 300 pages, but she has very good definitions on how different people approach it. And then the other piece that I like to encourage people to do is ask for help. Find support group, just like you reached out to Lean In. There are many different organizations out there that are mentoring or teaching, mentorship or sponsorship, right? Reaching out to people. You're not alone. Everybody suffers this or
How can we
experience.
better improve?
Right. Do you
based on each other's experiences?
exactly leverage the knowledge from other people? Just like we've been talking for several years, and you've been taking advantage of all the discussions that we've had. Reaching out to people, reading more, trying out different hobbies. We discussed that a little bit earlier before the podcast. Trying new things. Have some fun. You don't need to make it a bad experience by torturing yourself and worrying about it. Find something that you really like doing. Like if you find a task or something, activity that you feel like you're losing time too fast and you enjoy it thoroughly, that's a great hobby. It's a great pastime where you forget time. It just flew by so fast. You enjoyed it so much. That's an awesome hobby, right? So,
I really like the book that you shared, the mindset, because the example that you shared about how parents encouraging their children to have an A, because I feel like it's rooted into our society and how we grow up, and we take this on to our adult life. And I feel like that's what's hindering us now, to where we have to unlearn what was taught and not really appreciating the journey and in the learning, because we're so fixated on the consequence or the end result. So I appreciate you sharing that. I just learning to grow and being happy with the growth, because what you shared just now won't just apply for when you get the job after the interview, but it's also going to help you once you get the job, how to go about figuring out that new shiny job that you got, all the tasks that you have to do on a daily basis, because that's when the real challenges will come. The interview is just the first step, basically.
Yep. Exactly. So yeah, and then remember, just like our body is always growing, our mind's growing. We're not stuck. I know that's one of the treatments for, I think, Alzheimer's and other different illnesses, dementia even, is to have your brain constantly learning new skills, getting engaged with people, socializing. We're very social people. If you find what you like and what you don't like, the environment that you're in either helps you become happier or better, or it hinders you from becoming better. So be attentive and listen to how your body is functioning, how you're feeling, how your mood is. Try to figure out what variables are causing, and journaling helps with that, right? When you're doing your journal, don't just write how the day is.
Right.
Try to inventory how you feel, what people, who are the people that you interact with that's draining your energy, for example, versus the ones that uplift you. So you don't have to make everyone happy, but you can choose to remove yourself or disassociate from people that are not making you feel better. Just like that saying, flocks, the same, birds of the same feather flock together.
Right.
Right? It's like a magnet. You have to figure out how to move around and figure out who are people or stimuli that will help you build a growth mindset. It takes exercise. Doesn't mean you're permanent. Maybe you started with a fixed mindset, like the book mentioned, but the fact that you're willing to learn about it, that shows your initiative. You have initiative, the interest of growth. But now you just have to practice it as a habit.
Thank you, May. I really appreciate that. And especially coming from you, because you have, as you shared, you've done the legwork, you've practiced, and you are in the position that you're in now. And it's quite admirable. So I just wanted to say it out loud for the world to hear. So.
Well, thank you. I'm not the greatest at taking compliments, so thank you for saying that.
Well, that's what we're all here for, to help sharpen each other.
Yes, exactly. It takes teamwork, right?
Yeah.
So what's your next question?
Let's see. So my questions on an interview, the common questions, how do you go about answering those questions? Like I mentioned earlier, the behavioral questions. Specific, like I just want to kind of help the listeners, elaborate a little bit.
Okay.
Just because that seems to be more the norm on interview questions these days.
So you want to give a few of examples you've heard?
Yes.
Well, about you. I think you've been in a few interviews recently or in the past. What are the ones that kind of resonated for you and you felt you needed a little bit more assist on?
Well, probably the one about how do you handle a stressful situation on the spot? I think that would be
The best one for now. Okay.
for now. Yeah.
Yeah. So tell a story. So show examples. For example, I believe you did volunteer work, right?
Mm-hmm.
Talk about those stories. How you had very challenging schedules to fit, coordinating the event, for example. Describe that scenario. And the part that it was in a different country, it's even cooler, right? It's not a common thing to be in a different country to talk about that type of job, right? And it doesn't have to be just a job, it could be a hobby.
Right.
Let's say you're into skydiving, maybe you're into podcasting for that matter, or even working on writing a book. It shows that your creative side is functioning and you're leveraging that as part of your skill because there's detail in writing, right? Creativity is creating the story. A lot of it is based on your personal activities. Think of what makes you light up in the day when you wake up. What makes you happy? What makes you smile? What makes you laugh? Those kind of scenarios. And it could be even at work where you do pranks. Done that with my guys way back when I was still not a senior engineer. We enjoyed doing pranks to make people laugh. We even recorded it. It was fun to do. And I actually encouraged my team to do it as part of their career development plan. And I warned my bosses about it. That part of their exercise was to do pranks that wouldn't hurt people necessarily, but just for fun, just to see how creative they were. It could be software that they made. It could be something just to make light of, right? So having a lot of fun is the idea. Situation for stress, usually they're asking to see if you can be composed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Does it trigger you? So I know for me personally, the more stress it is, the more focused I get. I don't know what it is, but just for whatever reason, the more you try to push buttons, I zone in to whatever it is I'm doing.
Now, is that something that you would actually say in an interview?
Yeah.
Okay.
I would say it. If you feel that you've done and shown that, depending on what it is you're doing, yeah, I would describe that as an example of how well you handle stress. That you zone out everything else around you and you just focus on the task. That to me is a successful characteristic or talent to have because some get distracted, right? Really, just anything is a good example, but that's one of the biggest one I would share when it comes to stress.
Thank you. I appreciate you sharing examples that are not necessarily always work related, and sharing, like you said, the whole story from beginning to end, and describing it, and just hearing you talk. I feel like I have personally even been more laser focused when there is background noise or stress. Even just as a kid, I would sit at the edge of my bed doing my homework while my crazy cousins outside are making all kinds of racket and noises, and
there you go.
And I was able to focus.
See? You can talk about your childhood experience as well. You know, maybe you did like, I don't know, a project. Maybe you were building something, you were tinkering something, you were trying something new. Describe that experience and say, hey, because of my growing up, today I do something similar. I'm able to hone in on my skills further because since I was younger, I was able to focus in a fun way.
Mm-hmm.
I'm able to visualize it. So explain the process. So that's what they're looking for. A lot of them are saying, what are your techniques? So for example, just like what I asked my engineers, if you didn't know the technology or you're not familiar with this type of project, what would you do to prepare? That's one of the questions I would ask. And my preferred answer would be is that one, you read the documents, the technical documents out there, you labbed it up, you tested it. If you didn't know and you're not familiar, you've never done it before, you try it out and experiment, see what happens. Especially for things like engineering or anything that requires a system. This is your first time integrating, system configuring something or setting up something. It could be furniture even, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you don't know how to build it, do you read the manual?
Right.
Some people skip the manual when they shouldn't. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. They go straight to the last step and wonder why it's not
exactly
built.
Yeah, I mean, most of the diagram now for IKEA or any furniture, they have pictures, but people choose to skip that part, and that's when things fail, right? There's no shortcut again. You got to follow a step-by-step process for different things, the task. But that's also for interviewing. They're checking to see if you're organized. They're trying to see if you understand and you know how to prioritize things. How do you prioritize? Those are some questions that they might ask, but they might not say it like that. They'll just give you an example of it. So another question I would ask: how do you handle escalation? What do you typically do? If you can't solve the problem yourself, what's your next step? So let me ask you that question. How would you answer that as part of our practice?
I would reach out to my team and get feedback from them, because I mean, I'm not by myself, even though I can work independently.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I also have a team to help problem solve whatever project one person can't figure out. Sometimes another person has a different perspective. And then if after that we still can't resolve whatever task or project we're working on, then that's when we escalate it to the manager and involve them.
Exactly. And you want to do that and also escalate quickly enough, depending on the urgency. I'm a manager of 10 engineers, and nothing worse than you tell me last minute
Right.
there's a fire drill, but you didn't give me a heads up enough. I need data, right, to be able to resolve the issue. I'm on your side. I want to make sure that I protect my team and help my team get two sides of the story, all sides of the story. We can't just take one story and accept it. We have to make sure that we gather everybody that's involved in the situation, whatever was escalated, then sure you have all sides of the story. We can't assume. Don't take hearsay as fact. Make sure it's documented. And that's another thing that I always tell my engineers as well is, especially if they tell you that you haven't done a good job or you haven't completed part of the project task based on a statement of work. That's typically what it is for a project. So, or bill of material, whatever that is. Don't just take verbal. Make sure that you send updates, especially for decisions. So, if, for example, there's a decision that whoever it is that you're assisting, you discussed it verbally, send a follow up email and say, per our discussion, this date and time, this is what we decided we're going to do for this specific situation. Document it. You don't need to wait for a project manager or somebody else to document it. Just send an email as part of your process, so this way you can protect yourself. Verbal is not always what you can trust, right? You want to document things. Anything else as scenarios?
I know I've used this scenario in the past, but like, how do you de-escalate, an angry person that comes to you and asks you, in an irate way, why something didn't get done, or how do you handle that?
So for that, again, use data, right? Make sure you're composed. You don't want to answer and be irate as well. It's like feeding the fire.
Correct.
Right? Be as calm as possible. Breathe. Count to 5, 10, however you want to count. If you need to say, hey, can we discuss it a little bit later? So this way it gives you enough time first to distress. Especially if you're already emotionally, experiencing something that you shouldn't, and you don't want to respond in the wrong way. Just say, hey, can we discuss this in a few minutes? Let me just come back for a few minutes. I need to step away real quick. Walk it off if you need to. Go to room. Go in the bathroom and scream if you have to. But release the tension.
But what if it's the person who's coming at you with that?
Then you just listen. Okay. You only listen. Don't react. Right? Just make a note of what the concerns are to try to understand what the real issue is. Document it, maybe even list it. And then another good way to de-escalate is you can go back and say, all right, I understand. So let me just explain back what I thought I heard. So revert back and say, based on what you said, this is what I heard. Is this correct? Or is there something else that you need to clarify that I need to understand better? So try to repeat back what they said so that you can be on the same page. And at least this way, they realize you're trying to understand them and you're trying to clarify. This way, you guys don't get into a conflict. But preferably, you're in a listening mode. Sometimes people just need to be heard.
Yeah.
They're also stressed. People are going through many things. They may have something personal going on and they don't know how to compose themselves, right? If they haven't behaved in a bad, odd way before, I would say listen first. That's the best thing you can do. Sometimes they just need to vent. Obviously, there's exceptions. If it's severe and it's abusive, that's another story. But if somebody's just, really just having a bad day,
yeah,
Then let them vent a little bit and just check your tolerance. And then if you can't tolerate anymore, just say, hey, you know what? I need to step away. Excuse yourself from the situation, right? And then maybe depending on the scenario, you may need more help from other people because maybe you're not the decision maker or the final say to execute whatever it is that you need to execute. You may need an additional audience to help de-escalate this problem. And sometimes you need a witness, especially if you feel uncomfortable. If the person is making you uncomfortable habitually and often to the point where they're harassing, then you definitely need to report to the boss. If they're not the person harassing you, go to HR, report accordingly, follow the policies that you have for the company, and then maybe further on this, maybe it could be an outside agency if it's that bad, if it's escalated. But again, you got to follow the process, right?
Mm-hmm.
Make sure you document accordingly where you need to, because that happens too. But this is also some of the questions that may be indirectly asked by scenarios. They're not going to ask you how you behave when there's escalations like this. Um, but these are questions you should ask in a different way in light of being interviewed, right? Also, just because you're getting interviewed doesn't mean you don't get to interview the interviewee. Ask them why they like working there. What makes them excited to go back to work? Especially if they tell you how long they've been working there, ask them, hey, why do you like working here? Out of curiosity. Also, ask what the expectations are of you. What's your day to day operations? What are the typical hours? If you need help, who do you go to?
What are the questions that are okay to ask and the ones that you should steer clear from on an interview?
Well, it depends on the interview. If it's HR, then you ask HR questions, right? But if you're going through a technical or specific test, then you ask all the function related questions. It's also good to ask in the end, especially how you did. How are you performing, right? And if you're, see if they can give you a recommendation too. You might hear it from them because you asked. That's not a common question that's asked in the end of the interview is how you perform. It's better to do it that day because they're all busy. I would rather get it during the interview than wait till after and then be anxious about what they're going to think, right? So it's always better to just get it all in that one interview while you're talking to them.
Now, when you ask at the end, how did I perform? Would that be a misconception about a person's confidence, though?
No. If anything, you're brave being asked to be able to ask that question.
Okay.
To me, if somebody asks that question, that means you are willing to take good criticisms. You welcome feedback. That's a great characteristics. That's being brave. The fact that you asked that question means that you're willing to grow some more and know that it's expected that you may get extra instructions. You're not perfect 100%.
Okay. Let me see what else. From all your interviewing practices, because I can tell you've been through a lot of interviews, have there been any interviews in your lifetime that have stood out to you? And if so, can you explain what it is about the interviews or the interviewee that stood out to you?
Yeah, one of my favorites is the company that I applied before as my first consulting company was Burby. And I'm proud to have been interviewed by Jerry Steinhauer. He is one of the gurus in there. He's now one of the founders for Single Wire as well, software developer company. And what impressed me is that he was so surprised that I asked so many questions. He forgot his business card, right? And he ran to get it and to make sure that I got his business card.
Wow.
So that was a very genuine, surprising moment. I did not expect that from somebody that's really an expert.
Right.
I should be begging almost to have the job from him, but he was so genuine and normal, really down to earth person. It was so cool to be interviewed by him. Very intelligent, very sharp. He's amazing, and you wouldn't know. He was just like a normal person and just excited to meet you. And I will never forget that moment. I've been a consultant since 2007, and I'll never forget. And the cool part was when I got the interview, I came out of there and I felt 90% I was going to get the job.
Mm-hmm.
That's the best feeling. And that was me after interviewing after a year. Basically, I let go. I just said, you know what? I've had plenty of practice. I own this interview. I'm going to go in there and I got this. And as soon as I walked out of that building, 90%, if not higher, I was like, yeah, I got this job. And the next day, got the offer.
That's really impressive. Now, speaking of which, at the end of the interview, do you ask for the person's business card? Do you follow up asking them when will you hear back from them? It just made me think of that since you mentioned how you heard from them a day later.
Yeah, I would definitely get the business card if you want to take it, or even if you have the meeting invite from the web conference, you might have the email, and you can always say thank you to them and making sure you just want to get that info just to connect with them also and just say how great of an experience it is. They always like to hear that.
Well, before we wrap it up, I also wanted to ask about um, what are some ways that you prepare for the interview? Do you take some, key points on a note card? What do you do? I know you did mention earlier about, resting and laughing and being yourself and relaxing, but way before that, what do you actually do to prepare for the interview?
Rehearse with somebody you trust. Make sure that you ask the questions that you would ask, and then they can give you feedback. And just keep that as a mental note, right? You can write down notes, maybe even note cards, but read it then. And then when you're done practicing, let it go.
Okay. So
Right?
like just like 1 hour session or something like that, like the way you and I are talking about it, like that would be enough.
Yeah, that's plenty. Because you don't want to overdo it either, because then you're thinking about it even harder. So the goal is to just rehearse, practice, and then make notes if you want to, but then leave it behind. Do your day to day, whatever it is that you need to do, hobbies especially. Enjoy a bath, get a massage, do something relaxing, watch a funny movie, let it go. This way you release all the tension.
Okay.
Good?
I think so. I think that's a wrap. What do you think, May?
Yeah, that's a lot. So, well, thank you again, everyone, for listening to the podcast. See you on the next episode.
Thanks for having me, May. Appreciate you.